In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NBA games happening on March 3rd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NBA games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. San Antonio Spurs versus Philadelphia 76ers. Tonight in Philly, the whole thing feels a little upside down, with San Antonio rolling into Xfinity Mobile Arena on the last night of the rodeo road trip as the team that is expected to control the night, while a short-handed home side is trying to keep its season from sliding toward play-in territory. It is one of those matchups where you can almost feel the difference in stability, the visitors playing like a group that knows exactly who it is, the host trying to patch things together on the fly. San Antonio comes in with the confidence of a team sitting near the top of the Western Conference standings, a record in the neighborhood of 43-17, and the kind of balance that shows up in every tracking metric and on any given league pass scroll. The offense is efficient without needing to spam isolation, and the defense sits among the stingiest groups in the league, using length, timing, and positioning rather than constant gambling for steals. There was an 11-game win streak that just ended at the Garden, and that actually matters here, because groups like this tend to treat a loss not as a crisis, but as a reset button, the kind of quiet embarrassment that sharpens focus instead of breaking rhythm. Their identity leans on size and versatility, with Victor Wembanyama bending the floor on both ends, ball handlers running the show with pace and poise, and a rotation of wings and bigs who can all slide between roles without the system wobbling. They can play big if they want the glass, they can play spread out when they want driving lanes, and they rarely look rushed, which is usually what separates true contenders from teams that only feel dangerous on hot shooting nights. On the other side, the home team is scrappy but clearly patched together right now, with Joel Embiid out, Johnny Broome sidelined, and Paul George serving a suspension, which leaves Tyrese Maxey and rookie VJ Edgecombe carrying a load that would be heavy even for a fully built roster. Behind them, you have Kelly Oubre Jr., Dominic Barlow, and Andre Drummond in lineups that have to work incredibly hard just to survive long stretches against waves of length from Wembanyama, Luke Kornet, and the rest of that front court depth. Without Embiid, the interior softens, the defensive rating climbs into uncomfortable territory, and suddenly rebounds that used to be automatic become 50-50 balls that start extra possessions for the opponent. The schedule does not exactly help either, with this game opening a back-to-back set after a draining loss in Boston, which is the kind of spot where legs get heavy in the second half and focus slips just enough for a well-drilled group to pull away. If this matchup were a movie, the home side would be the opening band trying to steal the show with effort and energy, while the visitors have the better sound, deeper set list, and the kind of polish that usually wins out over 48 minutes, especially against a short-handed cast. As our first pick for this matchup, the San Antonio Spurs to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. At first glance, the total for this game looks like it should lean toward a quieter night, with an elite defensive unit on one side and an undermanned roster on the other that is missing its best scorer and best rim protector, which naturally makes people think of grinding half-court possessions and long, ugly stretches. Honestly, that is a pretty reasonable first reaction, and if you only look at surface-level labels like great defense and short-handed offense, you probably expect a pretty modest combined score. Here is the thing: once you look at how these specific versions of these teams actually play, the picture starts to tilt toward a higher scoring environment, even if the pace stays somewhere around league average. Without Embiid and without George, the home defense does not just dip a little, it becomes noticeably less solid, especially at the rim and on the glass, which hurts both their ability to get stops and their ability to control the tempo. That kind of roster usually ends up living with a "we might not be able to shut you down, so we have to keep scoring" mindset, and you see it when Maxey pushes the ball up the floor quickly after rebounds and Edgecombe attacks closeouts instead of slowing it down for long half-court sets. Those possessions tend to be shorter, with earlier shots in the clock, and even when they miss, they create more total trips up and down the floor, which quietly adds volume to the scoreboard. On the visiting side, that length and depth that makes the defense so strong also creates a kind of snowball effect on offense once they sense the rim is exposed. Wembanyama draws extra bodies the moment he catches near the lane, which frees up corner shooters like Devin Vassell, Julian Champagnie, or Keldon Johnson, and suddenly you have wide-open threes created from simple inside touches rather than complicated sets. When the primary guards get downhill, they are not just looking to finish, they are firing passes out to shooters or dropping the ball to bigs for easy looks if the defense collapses, which keeps the scoring spread out and sustainable instead of relying on one hot hand. This is the kind of offense that already grades out as one of the more efficient groups in the league, and now it is matched with a defense that grades closer to average on its best nights and clearly weaker without its star anchor in the paint. Game flow also nudges things toward more points than the reputation on the visiting side would suggest. If the game turns into one of those nights where both teams find a rhythm, you get a steady stream of made shots that keeps everyone comfortable and encourages quick answers on the other end. If it loosens up late, with benches trading buckets and defenders trying to avoid fouls rather than locking in for every last possession, those final minutes can quietly turn a reasonable score into one that sneaks past expectations. Even in a more competitive script, Maxey hitting big shots and role players firing away from three to keep things interesting creates the kind of back and forth that is very friendly to anyone rooting for points. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Oklahoma City Thunder versus Chicago Bulls. Sometimes it feels like the Thunder are playing a different sport than half the league. They come into Chicago sitting at a sparkling 47-15 with the best point differential and the top defensive profile in the league. Chicago, on the other hand, is sitting at 25-36, that awkward neighborhood where you are a little too good to be a hopeless case and a little too shaky to be trusted for anything more than chaos on a random Tuesday. Here is the twist that actually makes this spread interesting instead of automatic. Oklahoma City is walking into the United Center without the face of the franchise tonight. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is ruled out for this one with abdominal injury management, and he is not alone on the sideline. Isaiah Hartenstein, Brandon Carlson, A.J. Mitchell, and Jalen Williams are all out as well, along with long-term big man Thomas Sorbier. So this is not the full-strength, video game version of the Thunder that just dropped 30 from Shai in that 100-87 win over Dallas. It is the grindy, everybody chip in and defend like your life depends on it version. The thing is, that version of Oklahoma City is still a nightmare to play against. Their identity is not built on one guy taking 40% of the shots. It is built on a system that has them sitting first in defensive rating and first in net rating, with an offense that still lives in the top tier even when the main star sits. They are long at almost every position, they switch like it is second nature, and they play with that annoying patience where they are perfectly happy to make you work 15 seconds just to get into your first action. That kind of structure travels well, and it especially travels against teams that are still figuring out who they are from week to week. Chicago is exactly that kind of team. The Bulls are coming off a feel-good win over Milwaukee, but zoom out even a little and the picture gets a lot messier, with a negative net rating and a defense that sits in the bottom third of the league. They have already reshaped the roster during the season, shipping out familiar faces and leaning harder on Josh Giddey and a rotating cast of young pieces, and that has come with long stretches where they simply cannot sustain competence for all 4 quarters. You can see it in the standings, you can see it in the against the spread numbers, and you can see it in those games where they hang around for a half. The crowd gets hopeful, and then the third quarter arrives like a bad plot twist. The injury report does Chicago no favors either. Patrick Williams, Jalen Smith, Anthony Simons, and Zach Collins are all sidelined. Jaden Ivey is out for at least a couple of weeks, and Noah Essinga has been done for the year since his shoulder surgery. That is a big chunk of size, shooting and slashing that simply does not exist for them tonight. So while the Bulls have flashes of, hey, maybe this works, a lot of their lineups right now are patched together with whatever is healthy, which is not ideal when you are facing the most connected defense in the league. Honestly, this matchup feels like one of those games where the logo on the front of the jersey matters more than the names on the back. Even without their MVP, the Thunder bring structure, habits, and a defensive backbone that has held up in hostile buildings all season. Chicago brings effort, sure, but also a very real tendency to fall apart when a good team keeps squeezing them and refuses to give up easy stuff. Over 48 minutes, that usually turns into a separation on the scoreboard, even if the first quarter looks competitive enough to keep everyone honest. As our first pick for this matchup, the Oklahoma City Thunder to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, you see defending champs versus leaky defense, and your brain might immediately picture a track meet, but the ingredients do not really point that way right now. Oklahoma City just played a road game where they held Dallas to 87 points in a league where teams casually stroll into triple digits, and that is not some random fluke. It is a reflection of how they are perfectly comfortable winning at a slower, more physical pace. Pull Shea out of this one, and the Thunder naturally lean even harder into that personality. Without their primary on-ball creator, they are less likely to spam early clock isolations and more likely to work through half-court actions, post touches for their length inside, and that old reliable run 15 seconds of stuff, then trust the shot quality. That kind of approach usually drags the number of possessions down, especially on the road, and especially in a building that can get a little flat if the home team is not running. Chicago is not exactly built to turn this into a shootout right now either. Their offensive rating for the season sits closer to league average than league elite, and most of their natural bucket getters are watching in street clothes. No Simons pull-up barrage, no Collins short roll playmaking, no Ivy speed bursts off the bench, no SNU energy. What you get instead is a lot more responsibility on Giddey to orchestrate, more possessions that end with late clock decisions, and a general tendency for their offense to look bogged down whenever the first action does not work. Here is the thing. The Bulls have had stretches where the shots fall, the United center wakes up, and it feels like the scoreboard might start racing. But when you look at their full body of work, the defense is porous, the offense is choppy, and their most recent long losing run had plenty of nights where they could not even get to a respectable total, even against fellow flawed teams. Now throw in the league's best defense across from them, one that specializes in running you off your first option and contesting everything, and you start to see a script where both sides have to grind for clean looks instead of trading easy threes and dunks. You can imagine how this plays out. Early on, Chicago pushes a little tempo, tries to get the crowd into it, maybe strings together a couple of transition buckets. Oklahoma City settles in, starts getting back after misses, walls off the paint, and forces the Bulls into half-court chess for most of the night. The Thunder, short-handed, are in no rush either, happily taking their time each trip, squeezing value out of every possession rather than turning this into a loose, back-and-forth exchange. Instead of a fireworks show, you get something closer to a playoff-style arm wrestle in the regular season, with long stretches where the score sits on the same number for a few minutes, and both coaches are yelling more about defensive rotations than about fast breaks. Given the way both rosters are patched together right now, with the defending champs missing their MVP and key rotation guys and the Bulls missing half their scoring punch, expecting both sides to light up the scoreboard for 4 full quarters feels more like wishful thinking than sharp projection. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Memphis Grizzlies versus Minnesota Timberwolves. Memphis heads into Minneapolis as the banged-up visitor that everyone expects to fold, and that is exactly what makes this spot interesting. On paper, it looks simple. The home side owns a strong record around the top of the conference, while Memphis sits well under 500 at roughly 23-36 and has spent most of the year juggling new faces and long injury lists. Minnesota is comfortable in its own building with a healthy core and recent momentum, fresh off that emotional win over a top rival, and the general mood around this matchup feels like people are already penciling in a routine home cruise before the ball even goes up. Memphis, meanwhile, walks in with a report that reads like a roll call of missing pieces, with Jay Morant still stuck watching, big man Zach Edey not available, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope sidelined, plus Ty Jerome, Cedric Coward, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, and Taj Gibson all in various levels of street clothes or non-rotation status, which sounds brutal until you remember how this team has been living in that chaos for months now. Here is the thing, for all the noise about how mismatched this looks, the actual basketball between these two has not followed that script. Memphis has already taken the season edge, 2 wins to 1, and those games have not been sleepy blowouts where one side checked out early. They have looked more like long, stubborn tug-of-wars where the so-called underdog keeps answering every push with one of its own. That matters when you are talking spreads, because it shows you a pattern, not just a one-off fluke night where somebody hit a bunch of heat-check threes. The market loves the shiny record and the highlight win, so the home side gets priced like a machine. But if you peek at how often they actually beat expectations, especially in their own gym and in roles where they are expected to win comfortably, the story is a lot more average, even a little disappointing. Memphis, on the other hand, has quietly turned into that annoying road dog that never quite gets the memo that it is supposed to roll over, and their against the number results away from home reflect a group that stays engaged long past the point where most people have switched the channel to something else. The personality of these two teams feeds right into that dynamic. Minnesota looks every bit like a polished, serious playoff contender, the kind of group that does most things well, but that does not always translate into covering lofty numbers, because coaches in that position tend to care more about stacking wins than about stretching the margin in garbage time. Memphis has leaned into the opposite reality, with their star creator out and a chunk of their old core gone. This is now a roster made of hungry players trying to prove they belong in next year's rotation or next year's contract talks, and those guys rarely stop playing hard even when the scoreboard looks ugly. You can see it in the way they keep pushing the ball, keep hunting shots, keep scrapping for loose possessions long after a more veteran team might mentally pack for the next city. So while the matchup looks lopsided when you glance at the standings or scroll that injury report on your phone, the situation smells like one of those classic hold-your-nose spots where the value sits with the side no one feels good about taking. The group that already showed it can hang with this opponent and has every reason to play with a chip on its shoulder again. As our first pick for this matchup, the Memphis Grizzlies to cover the spread as underdogs is our full-game side pick. Both offenses have been comfortable putting up numbers this season, with Memphis around the mid-100s per night and giving up a similar amount, and Minnesota also living in that high-scoring neighborhood while keeping a respectable but not suffocating defense. Their recent clashes have tilted toward fast, free-flowing basketball, the kind of games where runs pile up, transition chances pop, and everyone at the scorer's table is getting a workout. Add in the fact that Memphis is coming off a big offensive night in Indiana and Minnesota just finished lighting up a strong opponent, and it is easy to see why any casual fan would shrug and say, sure, this one probably turns into another shot-making contest. Let me explain why that first impression might be a little too simple. Both teams are coming into this game with fresh mileage in their legs from March 1st, and that matters more than people admit when they are scrolling through stats on an app. Travel, short rest, and a long regular season grind often nudge games toward slower stretches, more half-court sets, and a little less joyful sprinting up and down for 48 minutes. Memphis has a short-handed rotation right now, and while that can lead to wild up and down spurts, it can also mean tired jumpers in the second half. Fewer hard drives into contact, and more possessions where the ball sticks on the perimeter because bodies are simply not as fresh. On the other side, the home team has every reason to lean on its defense, control tempo in front of its crowd, and treat this as a professional job, not a track meet, especially if the game tilts their way on the scoreboard and they can afford to prioritize control over chaos. When a matchup lines up like that, the way the game flows often matters more than those raw season averages. If the early stages are choppy or physical, or if whistles drag the rhythm into a slower, more methodical style, both coaching staffs are likely to settle into lineups and schemes that squeeze possessions rather than trying to turn it into a scoring festival. A strong defensive performance at home pairs with a tired and thin offensive group on the road to create the kind of environment where jumpers come up short, drives get walled off, and long, patient possessions eat chunks of clock on both sides. Public memory tends to latch onto the recent high-scoring meetings between these two and project them forward, but the context has shifted, with injuries, travel, and the grind of the schedule all pointing toward a quieter night on the scoreboard than people expect at first glance. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. New Orleans Pelicans versus Los Angeles Lakers. Spotlight game, bright lights, big brands, and yet it is the team in the underdog role that walks in with the kind of quiet chaos that can really mess with a comfortable favorite script. New Orleans keeps wearing that underdog label, but they do not always behave the way the standings suggest they should. One night they get blown out and social media shrugs them off. Then a couple of days later they are suddenly punching up against a contender and forcing everyone to recheck their priors. That kind of volatility is annoying if you want a neat narrative, but it is exactly what makes a big spread feel a little shaky. The favorite has the star power, the home crowd, and all the pressure. The Pelicans have something much simpler and honestly more dangerous in a spot like this, which is house money energy. A group with players fighting for contracts, roles, and respect tends to chase loose balls a little harder, bother shooters a little longer, and refuse to accept that a double-digit deficit means the story is over. The more talented team will have stretches where everything looks effortless. They will have that classic run where they string together stops, get out in transition, and make the scoreboard pop. The trick is that you still need that urgency from the first quarter through the final buzzer to crush a big number, and human nature is not always built for that. When the favorite goes up, you can almost feel the focus slip for a few minutes, a casual rotation here, a lazy closeout there, and suddenly the underdog sneaks in the back door. New Orleans is exactly the kind of team that can look overwhelmed early, then chip away possession by possession, almost like they are testing how relaxed the opponent is willing to get. There is also the simple rhythm of a long season to think about. The favorite is trying to manage minutes, health, and bigger goals. The Pelicans are trying to prove they deserve to be on that floor, and sometimes that difference in urgency shows up more against the number than in the win-loss column. You can picture the final few minutes, the crowd already assuming the job is done, while the underdog is still running full sets, trapping, attacking the rim, and turning what looks like a routine win into a sweat for anyone who laid the points. As our first pick for this matchup, the New Orleans Pelicans to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. On paper, with all the talent on the floor, it feels natural to imagine a track meet where both sides race up and down and the scoreboard barely has time to breathe. In reality, it usually takes a very specific mix to get to that kind of number, and one ingredient going missing can change the entire tone of the night. Every possession that turns into a grind, every trip where someone walks the ball up and calls for a set, quietly chips away at the path to an explosive total. Coaches are not blind to what happened in the last game. If one side just gave up a ridiculous amount of points, the film session that follows is not about playing faster, it is about tightening screws, getting bodies in gaps, and telling everyone to stop giving away layups like party favors. That mindset alone can slow things down just a notch, and a small shift like that matters a lot more than it sounds when you add up a full 48 minutes. Fatigue sneaks in too. A road team at the tail end of a stretch of travel tends to feel it in the legs first, which means jump shots come up short and transition opportunities get passed up for safer, slower possessions. Even the home side, if they have been leaning on their stars heavily, might be more willing to accept a half-court game, letting those lead creators work the clock, hunt mismatches, and live with methodical possessions rather than a full sprint. It still looks pretty, it still sells highlights, but it quietly eats time. One cold quarter is all it takes to drag a high total back down to earth. A few empty trips, a short stretch where both teams get stuck in foul trouble or stuck in replay reviews, and what felt early on like a scoring avalanche suddenly looks a lot more measured. Think about those games where the first 6 minutes feel like an all-star exhibition, then the rhythm tilts, benches come in, schemes tighten up, and you look up in the fourth quarter and realize the pace never quite returned to that early frenzy. That is the kind of flow this matchup hints at, with enough talent to scare you into thinking it will be fireworks all night, but enough situational factors to keep the final total more controlled than the number might suggest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Phoenix Suns versus Sacramento Kings. Phoenix comes in sitting at 34-26, 7th in the Western Conference and 2nd in the Pacific, which already tells you this season has gone better than many expected back in October. They just edged the Lakers 113-110, a tight win that snapped a little funk and reminded everyone that this group can close out tense finishes when it matters. That win was not just a random good night, it capped a stretch where Phoenix has quietly pushed past a lot of those early doubts. They have had 4 full days to rest, reset, and probably listen to plenty of film room grumbling, while Sacramento heads home looking like a team that has stared at too many airport carpets on a please-make-it-stop road trip. The Kings sit at 14-48, dead last in the conference, and they are basically in that experimental lab stage where you are not so much chasing wins as you are taking notes on who might still be around in a year or two. Phoenix's overall profile this season feels like a textbook playoff contender, nothing flashy at first glance, but very serious when you look closer. They score around 112.1 points per game, sit on the right side of the net rating line, and they hold opponents to about 111.4 a night, which lands them in that top defensive tier that never gets enough praise compared to highlight dunks. On top of that, they lean into modern offense with one of the stronger three-point identities in the league, both in how often they launch and how often those shots actually matter on the scoreboard. Sacramento is stuck in something much less comfortable. Their numbers look like a warning label, roughly 110.3 scored, a rough 121.2 surrendered, and a net rating that hovers around -11, which is pretty much being spotted a double-digit loss before tip-off on an average night. It is not just losing, it is the way they are losing, where you can feel the frustration in the body language long before you look at the box score. Then you get to the health side, which is where the gap really starts to look like a canyon. Phoenix is not completely whole. They are missing role guys like Dylan Brooks and Jordan Goodwin, and they have a big man question mark with Kaman Malua, but their primary engine, Devin Booker, is right back where he likes to be, running the offense and setting the tone. On the Kings side, the injury report reads like a rebuild note written in bold print, with Domantas Sabonis, Zach LaVine, and DeAndre Hunter all shut down for the season, and Keegan Murray parked for at least a couple more weeks with that ankle issue. When so many of your main pieces are in street clothes, it is hard to pretend the script is the same. Recent results tell the same story in a louder voice. Sacramento has been blown out 128-97 in Houston and 128-104 in Los Angeles, both within the last week, and those are not the kind of nights that boost locker room confidence. Every so often they pop up with something wild, like a 130-121 win in Dallas, which feels a bit like the basketball gods tossing in a plot twist so fans keep watching. Most of the time, though, it looks like a team that is hanging on, not driving the game. The market has responded in a way that matches what you see on the floor, treating Phoenix as a clear road favorite with a healthy cushion built into the number, more a reflection of one team still chasing seeding and leverage while the other is test-driving future rotation guys and trying to survive the schedule. Honestly, that makes sense when you stack everything together, rested legs versus road-weary ones, a defense that travels versus a defense that leaks, and a team with actual March urgency versus a group that has one eye on lottery odds and development minutes. It feels like the kind of night where Phoenix treats it like a business trip, leans on depth and perimeter shooting, applies steady defensive pressure, and slowly squeezes Sacramento's already thin core until there is not much left but the horn and the box score. As our first pick for this matchup, the Phoenix Suns to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The projected total for this one sits at a level that looks high enough to tempt people who love points, but the way these two teams are built right now makes that number feel a little ambitious. Phoenix is no longer that run-and-gun version that used to race up and down and light up every possession. This group prefers to squeeze games, slow them down, and live in the half court, which is not always as fun on a highlight reel, but is very effective for controlling tempo. You can see it in the scoreboard pattern over the season. Across their first 60 games or so, they sit around 112.1 points scored and 111.4 allowed, with a net rating just slightly in the positive, solid and respectable, but not some fireworks show where everything explodes into a track meet. Look at their last four outings: 113-110 against the Lakers, 81-97 against Boston, 77-92 against Portland, and 113-110 against Orlando. Every single one of those landed short of the kind of total that has been posted for this game, and two of them felt like old-school slugfests where every bucket took effort and patience. Sacramento, funnily enough, gets to the same place from a very different direction. Their season scoring profile screams chaos. They give up about 121.2 a night, which is the worst in the league, and they sit at the bottom in threes made and attempted, which is a strange mix in the modern game. It means their defense leaks points from the arc and beyond, while their own offense leans more on twos and free throws instead of stretching the floor with volume shooting. That is how you end up with swings like dropping 130 in Dallas, then struggling to even crack 100 in places like Houston with 97 and Los Angeles with 104, all in basically the same stretch of games. Context for this particular night matters a lot when you are thinking about the total. The Kings are playing without Sabonis, LaVine, and Hunter, so the offense is running on fewer reliable creators, and the remaining primary options are carrying heavy usage on a team that already knows its spot near the bottom of the West is not moving much. In that situation, the natural instinct is often to slow the game a bit, manage minutes, get through 48 minutes healthy, and live to chase ping-pong balls and long-term development another day. Phoenix has shown a pretty clear pattern in these kinds of mismatches. They are comfortable turning them into low drama, low possession games. They build a lead methodically, lean on their size and length on defense, take threes when they are there, and otherwise are happy to let the clock do a lot of the heavy lifting. When the margin grows, you tend to see less frantic late-game fouling, starters sitting earlier, and a whole lot more calm half-court possessions, which quietly chips away at the chances of a wild, high-scoring finish. Any call on pace and scoring always has a bit of uncertainty baked in. That is part of the fun and part of the risk. But here the view comes straight from how these teams have played this particular season, from the current scoring profiles, efficiency patterns, and the confirmed injury situations on both sides. As of March 3rd, 2026, not from ancient head-to-head stats or old names that are no longer on the floor. When you combine a slower, defense-tilted Phoenix approach with a short-handed and inconsistent Sacramento offense, and add in the real possibility of a comfortable margin that encourages both sides to shorten the game rather than speed it up, the picture that forms is of a contest that is more likely to land beneath what the market is asking for on the scoreboard. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.